To order.
How do I get on here?
Welcome to the Rotary Club of Beaumont, the 72nd club founded in the world. Today, our invocation is going to be given by Ty Kudrain, owner, Ty Kudrain Aflac Insurance Agency, and our pledges will be led by Joanne Brown, Major Gifts Officer, Lamar University.
Say what now?
Ty?
Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, in our blessing and good fortune, help us to always be mindful of our neighbor who is not experiencing blessings or good fortune. We pray especially for our neighbors in Louisiana. Help us pool our resources and efforts that we may be a help to those suffering all of the loss. And in these times of political division and upheaval, help us again see each other as neighbors and not enemies. Help us remember that only you can heal our country, and that apart from you, all efforts are in vain. In your name I pray, amen.
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 Hello, everyone. If you will allow me to lead the pledge to the American flag and the Texas flag, Jackie is presenting both to us now. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor
the Texas flag.
I pledge
allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God,
one
and
indivisible.
indivisible.
Cindy, you're muted.
Thank you, Joanne. Now, Jay Wilson, Board Secretary, is going to present board action from our meeting yesterday.
Thank you, ma'am. In the board action yesterday, the board approved a classification change for Jay Wilson, yours truly, from multimedia consultant, southeasttexas.com, classification, newspaper advertising consultant, to sales, express employment professionals, classification, sales, business staffing. We also had the difficult task of terminating 3 members, Alan Ayers, Benny Hughes, and Sandra Whitmire. We accepted 3 resignations with regret, and those were from Tony Clark, Alan Lee, and Lindsay Walker, all of which are moving from Beaumont. In other business, the board approved appointing 2 members to join the board to complete the term of office vacated by the resignations. Joining the board will be Lynn Hill and Wes Shipley. Wes will serve as Sergeant at Arms. We approved continuing disaster relief collections for Lake Charles after Hurricane Laura. Your generosity has been much appreciated. We will continue to recruit volunteers to help the Salvation Army supply meals and snacks to Texas and Louisiana residents who have been impacted by effects of the hurricane. They need a lot of help, so please volunteer if you are able. We'll also be letting you know about projects with the Southeast Texas Food Bank, as there are many who are suffering food insecurity. The board approved our work on a service project presented by Community Service Projects Chair John Lee. We will help build beds for children with sleep and heavenly peace on September 26th. John will have more information and details at our next meeting. And like every month, we debated the idea of when is the right time to again begin meeting in person for our weekly meetings. While our board members are also very anxious to be able to meet together again, when we consider the highest priority, the health and safety of every Rotarian, we decided the right thing to do is continue holding Zoom meetings at least through the end of October. We'll reevaluate the decision again next month and we'll make adjustments as necessary. Meanwhile, for those who are ready to meet up with fellow Rotarians on a strictly social basis, we are going to start Rotary Fun and Fellowship Socials, some small gathering of Rotarians at local restaurants. The Dutch Treat Social will have a host, but no agenda, and you can select to attend by the location or time of day or who the host is. You'll learn more about fun and fellowship socials soon because we plan to have our first socials this month. That concludes the board action, Madam President, unless you would like to add something about the socials.
I just want to add that we're shooting for the week of September 21st for those. So far, I have 3 people that are willing to host at a restaurant where we can have up to 10 people join in to meet in the guidelines. And if you are interested in helping out with me and Ty and Sherry Pierce plan that, please give one of us a call, and we're going to get together and get that rolling and have an announcement by next Wednesday. So thank you very much for updating us on club business, Jay. Now we're going to move on to our speaker for today. She will be introduced by Lynn Hill, co-owner of Nuvation Tech.
Good afternoon, Rotarian. It is my pleasure to introduce one of my very best friends, Dr. Renee Brown. She is an Air Force brat who spent the majority of her time growing up in the DC area, Fairfax County, Virginia. She went to undergrad college at the University of Dallas and medical school at Howard University, where she graduated in 1990. She did her residency at UT Houston, where she was the chief resident. After that, she honored our country with her enlistment in the Air Force, and she was in Del Rio, Texas, where she supported pilots and families and was the base pediatrician. Following her time in the service, she came to Beaumont in 1997 and worked then with Drs. Hubble and Taylor together. And when Dr. Taylor left the practice, she and Dr. Hubble formed a partnership in 1988, and there came, Beaumont Pediatric Center. The practice now has around 25 employees, including 5 pediatricians and 2 nurse practitioners. She has 2 beautiful, beautiful children. Andre, who is, to her delight, in his 3rd and last year of law school at UT Law, and Olivia, who is a junior at Baylor. She is the poster child for, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. And that is her. She loves what she does, and she loves children. So here we have Dr. Renee Brown DeMar.
Good afternoon, everybody. How you guys doing? Okay, so thank you very much, Lynn. She's much more complimentary than I would consider myself to be, but I thank you. It's been kind of a crazy week with the hurricane, and I honestly forgot about this presentation. So I was telling Jackie last night, I'll kind of fly by the seat of my pants. I hope y'all will bear with me. I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So if I don't include something in what I'm getting ready to present, just let me know. So I was asked to talk about coronavirus, or COVID-19. COVID-19 stands for coronavirus, CO, VI for virus, D for disease, and then 19, it was discovered in 2019. This is a virus that hopped species from bats to humans, which is why it's causing us so much trouble. Coronaviruses as a class are a pretty common class of virus. It causes the common cold. For humans, the coronaviruses that are present in humans, we've had them for millennia, and that's why they don't usually kill us unless we have some kind of underlying problem. So, we're all, again, flying by the seat of our pants, I guess, is the best expression, because everybody's learning about this virus in real time and trying to get information to the general public in real time. And it's very difficult because this is a really complex issue. They're trying to understand how it works and how to treat it. Most viral illnesses are not treatable because viruses live inside the cell. That's the difference. A bacteria lives on the outside of the cell. So it's easy to make an antibiotic to kill it and not kill the cell, but viruses live inside, replicate using our own genetic codes, and then explode the cell and go to other places. So to kill something inside the cell, you usually have to kill the cell. So it's very difficult to find antivirals. That's why there's no antibiotics for a cold. There's only a few antivirals available for HIV, for herpes, and a few others. So it's not like we have a lot of treatment options, but they're desperately searching for something. So one of the things that can help you understand how this virus works, if I can find my, well, shucks, where is it? If I can find my screen that I wanted, I'm trying to find my screen, guys, sorry. Well, where is it, Lynn?
Share the screen. Go down to the share the
Well,
screen.
no, I'm on the share the screen part, but I don't see the screen that I want. I have a picture of what a coronavirus looks like, and it's not showing up on my share screen thing. I'm under basic though, so that might be part of it. Going to be under files. I might have to add it.
Is it on your desktop?
No, I could probably put it on my desktop. It's actually in my Safari. Let's see. Is there some way I can save this? Maybe an airdrop. Can we do airdrop? Let's see if it'll go there. No, it's not going to do that. Okay. Well, I was trying to find it, guys. The virus is shaped, it's a sphere, it's a spherical organism, and it's got all these little spikes on it. And I wish the picture would come up. And it has all these little spikes on it. And so it embeds itself, attaches itself to mucosal tissue. So this type of tissue on our skin, our regular skin, is called epithelial tissue. Certain type of cells that are stacked, and that helps protect us from the outside world. The skin inside our mouth and in our airways is what we call mucosal tissue, much more soft, and it has these what we call columnar cells. So they're cells that are shaped like columns because they can excrete things to keep the skin, the tissue moist, excrete mucus to help protect us against organisms and that type of thing. It locks into that soft tissue and does its job. And so it embeds into those cells, replicates, explodes those cells, and keeps going. So millions and millions and millions of these organisms are produced and go millions and millions and millions of different cells and places. So that's why at first you don't realize what's happening and you're not feeling very sick. And then once enough is out there that the body starts to see something wrong, that's when you start having your symptoms. You'll start having runny nose, coughing, those types of things. And these are all protective mechanisms that our body has made to try to help us get rid of what is making us sick. We're producing mucus to get it out. We're coughing to get it out. We're raising our body temperature because it doesn't like a higher temperature. It's trying to kill it. So all those are natural defenses, and that happens with, most illnesses. Our body is very adept at doing that. God made a beautiful design in our bodies. But with this virus, and they don't know why, there are certain proteins that will activate certain parts of our immune system and make it go in overdrive. So it overreacts. And so that's part of what has been killing some people, besides having an underlying condition like high blood pressure, diabetes, or, something else that may affect their immune system, is some people's immune systems go into overdrive and produce so many what we call cytokines. These are chemicals that go out and kill organisms, but if you release too many, it also kills the cell. So if we release too many cytokines, we're killing lung cells, and that's where the bulk of these are. And these people's lungs on X-ray and on CT look like big cavities of tissue have just been eaten out. And that's why it's so difficult to get these people to breathe. It's very hard for them to exchange oxygen. It could also happen in other organs. It can happen in their kidneys. It can happen in their brain. And so that's what they try to control. So there's a lot of controversy over, the hydroxychloroquine. That is a drug in general that helps dampen immune responses in certain types of diseases. The problem with most of the studies that are being conducted right now is this is such a deadly thing when people get to that point that nobody is willing to let anybody die. Whenever you have a study, you have to have a control to be able to say it worked versus it doesn't. Nobody is willing to do that. Nobody is willing to say, okay, we're going to do hydroxychloroquine with these people and nothing on these people, So everybody would get a dose of hydroxychloroquine before they went upstairs in the emergency room. Well, you can't compare anything because you don't have your control. But nobody was willing to let anybody die and say, well, let's not treat them, let's just see. So then you have to do what's called a retrospective study and look at the people who got it versus the people who didn't and see what the percentages of survival were. So that's where they kind of have come up with the conclusions that they've come up with. The same thing with the steroids, with dexamethasone and that type of thing. None of these are going to be that magic bullet cures that are going to be helpful for everybody. I mean, we have a bazillion different types of antacids because every antacid doesn't work for every person. And it's going to be the same instance for the treatment for this disease. One treatment does not fit all. There are some people who have underlying conditions. If they took steroids, it would make their condition worse instead of better. So there's all these things in the mix that make it more complex. So that's why the medical community is begging people, if we can mitigate the number of people getting infected and we don't get so overwhelmed at the hospital, then hopefully we can get this under control. And with time, it's taken 8 months, 9 months, you know, they're starting to figure out some things that work and the recipes that are more successful and, you know, that kind of thing, turning people prone and those types of things. But if they get overwhelmed, I mean, in New York, part of the reason why people died was because they literally didn't have anybody to turn people prone. They didn't have anybody to turn them on their bellies because they were so busy with all these patients trying to save patients that people just fell through the cracks. And a very simple maneuver could have been the difference between life and death on a lot of people, but the medical community's been overwhelmed. Everybody says, well, it's not that deadly. It's only a 2%, 1% death rate. That's a lot. And when you look at 300 million individuals in this country, 1% is 3 million people. That's a lot. And who's willing to sacrifice their 1% of their family? It's very, it's hard to conceptualize that this could affect you and affect your family until it hits your household. And for us who don't want anybody to die, it's almost insulting to me when they say it's only, you know, colds have 0.0000, you know, mortality. The flu has 0.1% mortality. So when you say 1%, and the flu kills thousands of people every year, so you say 1%, that's 10 times more than what the flu does. That's nothing to sneeze at, pardon the pun. So, you know, we don't want to just take people's lives for granted. It's not a difficult thing to try to get us all to want to protect our neighbor and save our neighbor and wear a mask, wash our hands, don't go to places and congregate. Those are the things that help spread it. Unfortunately, I mean, we also have an economy that's in desperate trouble. And my heart is broken for bar owners and restaurant owners and all those people that rely on that type of behavior to keep going. And answer that. School is another issue. Right now, we're really, you know, we're just getting into school. The hurricane kind of blasted everybody out again, but we're trying to come back together. I've worked with the Diocese of Beaumont to try to develop some plans to get kids back into school and into CCD or catechism, you know, Sunday school type of Catholic education. And one of the things that I advocate for is putting people in pods. So that's where they come up with the rule for Texas, 10 people at a time, that type of thing, so that we're not spreading this to large numbers of people, because literally it's an exponential spread once you start doing that. And when people try to contact trace and see where have you been now that you could be infectious, it becomes impossible. So the smaller we keep that number, the easier it is to control it if there is an outbreak. And we're doing the same thing in school. As much as we can, we're trying to keep kids outside. We're trying to keep them socially distant from one another. We're trying to have some barriers. And I advocate for a mask. I know the law or the ruling is, you know, 10 and above, but, you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics says 2 and above kids can wear a mask with no health problems. So we need to do that. And kids are very adaptable. I have in my office kids that are 2, my thing's dying, kids that are 2 and above, they wear a mask and they have 0 problem with it. So, you know, we don't have the kind of issue, you're gonna see me twist over here, we gotta find an outlet. You don't see kids having a serious problem with this It's more the adults that have the problem. So if we have the proper attitude for our students, then, you know, our kids will do well. The other thing is barriers. So, you know, we can put the face shields on the teachers and the children, barriers between pods, so that if somebody does get it, we don't have the whole school shut down. We have a small group of kids shutting, you know, having to quarantine, so that everybody's not disrupted. Parents are having a hard time. You can't just take on and off of work. I am thanking God that I don't have a school-age child right now, because I'm a working mother who couldn't sit and do homework with their kids or teach their kids during the day. Plus, to teach your child during the day, I would rather shoot myself in the face. Those are the worst fights I ever had with my children when I tried to tutor them with something. So I know you guys are probably in the same type of boat. So, and it's tough. And not all parents are going to have the knowledge base to help their kids. So there's so many issues with this and so many developmental problems with this. And so again, our hearts are broken. And we are trying desperately. I keep praying for God to give me some kind of divine intervention on how can we cut through some of this and make this easy for everybody. There's just no good answer right now. Hopefully there will be one soon, but you know, right now we're learning on the fly. We're learning as we go. They have gotten smarter. So now the mortality rate is decreasing, thank God. But our infectivity rate was starting to increase. Now, I do have one that my screen share that I can actually share because I had it on here last night. Oh, there it is. Okay, here's my COVID. See, I was telling Jackie yesterday, I can save your life from meningitis, pneumonia, whatever, but electronics is not my forte. So this is what the coronavirus looks like. It's a sphere with all these little sticky things that stick to the cell. These proteins, the HEM, S, and E proteins, these are the proteins that they're trying to develop a vaccine for. So they're trying to train the body to recognize those particular proteins and develop an immune response to kill that so that it cannot embed in the cell. Once it gets stuck on there, then, you know, we're in trouble because the whole process has started. So they're trying to get the body to recognize these little guys at the door and kind of like bouncers, bounce them out before that they have a chance to cause any trouble. In Beaumont right now, and we've been following this, the infectivity rate, that's not the one I wanted. Where's the other one? Sorry, guys. This is, and this is a little older data. This is from the beginning of August. I was working with the diocese, and this is Jasper County, Newton, all the counties in the diocese of Beaumont for Catholic schools and religion to see, and we plotted the information as far as how many people are infected, how many people are in the hospital, that type of thing. And this is where that data goes and plots it as a percentile. We plotted it as a color graph to see what's the percentage of the general population. So you see, this is Chambers County and Jefferson County at the beginning of August, over 2% infection rate in the city. And that was an issue because your chances of coming in contact with people are pretty high. So if you don't have it under control in your community, you cannot get it under control in your schools. These are the numbers that we really need to look at when we're looking at infectivity rate. Now, I tried to plot it later down here. It wouldn't let me. We are now down to about 1% infectivity in Jefferson County, and some of the other smaller counties are starting to increase. So, you know, that's a potential issue that we may have to deal with. And you see some of the states across the country that weren't severely affected are now becoming more affected. So it's rolling through. We also have a decrease of data because of the hurricane. So there may be an issue with that jumping back up. I'm hoping not, but we're just not sure about that yet. So, you know, the numbers change daily. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. We have a holiday weekend coming up. We really encourage people to meet in small groups. Everybody wants to celebrate and be outside and all that. And if they're outside in small groups, you should do fine. But if you're confined in a space where you're breathing all these germs. It's a concentration of germs, and it's the amount of time you're breathing in those germs that's going to affect how easily you get sick from this virus. That's why restaurants and bars are, on the bad list, unfortunately, because you're sitting there eating and drinking, nothing covering your face, and you're in close proximity to people for a large amount of time because you're sitting there having a meal, at a bar, socializing, whatever. In the grocery store, it's not as big a deal. You're 2 ships passing in the night. You're not there for more than 15 minutes face to face with an infected person. That's why the grocery stores and that kind of thing aren't as big a source of infection as a bar, a restaurant, or a school where you're sitting and emitting germs for long periods of time. My office, the same kind of thing. One of the local doctor's offices in town had a huge outbreak. They were wearing masks when they were in patient contact, but they weren't wearing masks when they were eating. And somebody was a asymptomatic spreader, and 20 people in a doctor's office got COVID. Then you're stuck. You got to go home. And so the office has to shut down. So there's still economic impact to all this. Even if you don't die, you just get sick. I mean, the average is 2 weeks on this, and that's huge. We can't have that many adults getting sick for 2 weeks and being out of work. So there's all kinds of implications on that. So I'm kind of out of breath. Does anybody have any questions?
Dr. Brown, I read an article that I'll try to summarize that it basically dealt with COVID testing and the number of cycles, I believe is the right term, that are being used to analyze those samples. And the point being that if you run the analysis long enough, you will discover very trace amounts of the virus that typically don't result in symptoms. So there was some question about how many cycles we ought to run in these tests, because they were finding 10% of these total number of tests currently are reflecting groups that may or may not even need quarantine. Are you familiar with that story?
Not in particular, but there's several COVID tests out there, and that is part of the problem with trying to determine if somebody is truly infected. Should they be quarantined? Should they be isolated? It's a hard problem, because if you have no symptoms, it's hard for people to alter their behavior. We've seen even with symptoms, with a positive test, they're not altering their behavior. They're still going out and about. So if you have 0 symptoms, it is very difficult. And there's a couple of different tests. One is the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction test, and that's where they're trying to replicate the DNA or RNA of this organism and detect it. And I think that's what you're talking about when they go through those cycles. And so they're trying to do this replication process. And if they do it enough times, you can make enough almost to artificially make an infection, I guess. That's the most simplistic way to say it. And so that they're trying to find that sweet spot. Where are we where we are at the infectious stage where we could harm other people versus, not so much, and everything would be fine. And I don't know if there's an answer to that yet. The quick test that we're doing, that's where we're trying to measure a protein that is produced by the virus. And so that is not as accurate, but it's much faster, and there's no cycling to that. There's a reagent that's applied to the sample, and it's going to show you yes or no, plus or minus, kind of like a pregnancy test. Some of those have varying accuracy. Some are very accurate at 95 or greater % to detect somebody who is positive. But then you want to know what the specificity is, which is how many false negatives will you have? And so you want to have a pretty high number as far as being sensitive and specific for a particular disease process. And there's not too many of the quick tests that will give you that, to give patients good information to alter their behavior in an appropriate manner. We're still having trouble with manufacturing of the test kits themselves and the reagents. In my office, we were supposed to get the quick test a month ago. I'm still waiting. We have the PCR test that we send off to the lab. Right now, we're getting a turnaround time of about 2 to 3 days. It was up to 14 days, but they send me like 50 to 100 a month, which is not nearly enough. So then we also run into the problem of who gets the test, and so we say, are you test worthy or are you not? somebody that just has regular cold symptoms, especially in the pediatric population where they're not going to be that severely affected, I really would like to test those kids and see where they are, because I'm not so worried about their health as I am the people they're going to give it to. Grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, those types of people. And that's my worry there. But I can't just do the test because I don't have enough. So I have to wait for a kid to be relatively ill with fever and cough and be really down to say, okay, I can spend the money on that, or not the money, spend the test, run that test on that child and have more of a possibility of having a positive. It's a terrible position to be in. And we're hoping that they can get more of the quick tests out so that we have more opportunity to test people that have minor symptoms. Did that answer your question, Diane? Yeah. Is it not working?
Yes, thank you very much.
Dr. Brown, I have a question. My mom was recently in the hospital and they did I think they did 3 or 4 tests. They did the swab and 3 blood tests on her to find out if she was recently exposed, if she was exposed in the past, and then an antibodies test. And the doctor said some people are retaining the antibodies and some people aren't. And I don't know if you can answer that question, but is there a reason for that? Or did that make sense? Sorry.
I think she was having a little battery trouble on her computer. I hope we didn't lose her. Otherwise, I'll make up an answer to that question for you. Which is scary.
You're great, Jackie. Thank you.
Wait a minute. Let me see. I'm getting a text.
Dr. Jackie.
No, I was kidding.
PhD.
She's going to be right back on, she says.
I was like, she doesn't want to answer me.
I think she was having trouble getting her battery or maintaining her battery. It's a good time for everybody to formulate their questions so we can have them for her. And Cindy, maybe you could sing.
That's very funny. I can sing, but not well.
You make a joyful noise, I'm sure, Cindy.
Can somebody sing or dance?
Rather than singing, why don't you tell us about the different alternatives we might consider for meeting one day?
Okay, kind of what we're thinking about is meeting up at local restaurants, and a host will have like 6 to 10 people, however many you're comfortable in whatever the restaurant can accommodate. And so in 2 ways, we support our local businesses, and we also get a chance just to visit with each other. And we're going to try to do that the week of the 21st, and we'll do it similar to Rotary Goes to Work, where Jackie will send out a little sign-up sheet, and you can sign up for Toast a Joke with whoever's hosting that. Everybody has to pay for their own meal, though. Whoever's hosting is not going to float the whole boat, so Dutch treat. But we'll get some information. I've had 3 people text me during this meeting saying they want to help, so it looks like it's, hopefully we'll have quite a few people that are interested in just meeting up and visiting.
That's also,
and after listening to the doctor, we will wear our mask in there, and then as soon as we get their food, then we'll take them off.
let's plug the Salvation Army project too while we're sitting and waiting.
Okay.
The Salvation Army group is feeding people at multiple locations. It's a major operation that they're taking food to Lake Charles in that area of Louisiana, but also Newton and Orange and Bridge City areas are all having feeding stations. So they need people who can go into 2 groups of people, some that are willing to do that, to go to the sites, and others that can work there in the warehouse preparing the things that need to be delivered the next day, preparing things that are going to have to go on the trucks to carry the food, you know, the pans and the plates and the whatever, the beverages, whatever. So if you want to work one of those, and if you can't sign up on the online thing, just give me a call and we'll put you down there. They're planning at least 2 weeks of doing this, and maybe longer depending on things and how it powers back on or not on in those cities.
Okay, we're sorry.
Technical difficulties. I told you, I can save your life. I cannot run a computer.
Somebody was asking a question. Who was it?
Mandy Clayton.
It was, I had mentioned my mom was recently in the hospital, and when she was there, they did 3 or 4 tests in the emergency room, the swab, and one to see if she was exposed previous, and one if recent, and then an antibodies test. And the doctor said that some people aren't holding on to the antibodies and some people are.
Exactly.
Do you know the reason for that, or can you explain why some people are retaining them and some of them aren't?
Well, and that's part of the immunology that everybody's trying to understand. Everybody's immune system is different, and we all respond to illness in a different manner. So again, it's hard to paint that broad brush. Generally speaking, when you have a cold, you're going to be immune from that cold for quite a while, months to years. And that's why kids get sick so much, because they haven't been exposed to all these things. And then once they've caught all these colds, you don't see them get sick quite so often. But there are some people who do not make antibody either enough, or does it last long enough to keep them protected. I always tell people that the immune system's like the CIA. You do not see the success, you only see the failure. And so that's part of the problem. In the vast difference of all of us in our genetics, what is it about one person's immune system that makes them be okay and another person's immune system that does not? Still, the jury's out on that.
Hi, Doctor.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Gary Moncla. I wonder if you could clarify something. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times when they're talking about the number of people who passed away from the virus, that a lot of times, almost majority of them have the underlying issues with their health. And, you know, I've been told, and of course everybody has too, that somebody who dies of cancer, but they tested positive, it's showed that they died from the coronavirus and not from the cancer. And so it actually skews the number of people who actually contracted the virus and died just from the virus, not something like from a heart attack or a car wreck, or, you know, we're hearing those things. Is there any truth in any of that, or?
In this community, I can tell you no. I think that, and I remember when that story first came out, because there was some incentive for the hospital to be able to get money if COVID was the reason of death. And so there was a story circulating that hospitals were falsifying records and that type of thing. I will tell you that that is not what's happening here. Our doctors are working very, very hard, and there are people with underlying conditions. But you got to remember, if COVID is what put them in the hospital, even with the underlying condition, then and they end up dying, then chances are COVID is what killed them. So you could have still had diabetes or COPD or something, got COVID, got sick enough to be in the hospital. COVID is going to be your cause of death. I had a very dear friend who just passed away from COVID. He had Parkinson's, but the COVID killed him, not the Parkinson's.
Right.
So, you know, you can have an underlying condition and still have something come out of left field and knock you down.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Lynn just asked, what do you think about the flu and COVID? We're scared to death because you can catch more than one thing at a time. And both of those are diseases that like your lungs. And so to have two diseases that can be heap a lot of havoc on our lungs at the same time is very frightening for us. And so we are encouraging people to get their flu shot so we could at least hopefully take one thing off the table. We're not looking forward to this winter at all. at all. Lynn said that I love my job, which I absolutely do. I teach kids, do what you love, because you got to do it every day, whether you want to or not. And right now, I really don't want to. Like, scaring me to death.
Doctor, this is Alan Sampson. You mentioned that the virus came from bats. It crossed from bats to humans. Is there any indication why bats would have been particularly susceptible or could transfer this type of illness?
Actually, this coronavirus does not kill bats. We all have organisms that live in us and on us as part of our natural flora. We're teeming with organisms in our body and on our body, and this happened to be one that's on bats. There are many parts of the world and some parts of our country that have livestock, markets. And so they have live animals in the open market for people to consume or buy or whatever. And so in parts of the world, and China's a big one, where you have a lot of this type of thing, monkeys, bats, chickens, all kinds of things, the chance for a species to, an organism to jump a species is increased because we're right there. Avian flu jumped from birds to humans because of that close contact in that type of environment. And that's the culture of that part of the world. We don't have that so much. We have it a little bit. So we don't have that big a spread of that type of thing, but in that part of the world, that's done quite commonly. And we do have these jumps from one species to another of certain organisms.
One further question, is the virus, is it, what do you call it, when they adapt, the virus adapts and changes? Is it changing in any way?
Yeah, mutation. It is to a certain extent. So, you've heard a couple of case reports of people getting COVID more than once because it looks like it is starting to mutate. And that's, again, another scary thing. So once it figures out how to evade our defenses, then you're vulnerable again. So, they're keeping a close eye on how fast does it mutate. The more people it gets to infect, the more practice it has trying to survive, the more mutation you're going to see.
Is it affected at all by weather or any changes in temperature?
Repeat the first part. I didn't hear the first part.
Is it affected at all by environmental conditions, such as weather changes or temperature changes?
Yes, this virus does not like hot temperatures, and it doesn't like really cold temperatures either. So then you're looking at behavior. So that's why being outside is a safer place to be as far as the spread or transmission of this virus, because it doesn't like hot temperatures. It doesn't like ultraviolet light. Those are things that can kill it relatively easily. But the behavior of humans when we have extremes of temperature is we are going to congregate inside where it's temperate. So in the wintertime, we get more cold and flu, generally speaking, because we're inside. It's cold outside. And so we have more people in there breathing their germs in the air and more opportunity to get infected. The same thing's happening with COVID. Everybody was hoping when it got hot, COVID was going to die. Unfortunately, we go inside where it's more temperate and we can continue to spread it.
Dr. Brown, I have a question.
Yes.
Dr. Brown, could
the that children don't have as many symptoms, that even though they may have the virus, have you seen a lot of children in your practice that have actually have it?
Yes. They have, we've had probably about 20% of the kids that we test have been positive. They've had, and again, we're selecting out for the most likely. So these are kids that are relatively sick with fever, cough, have a direct exposure, usually from a parent who might have gotten it at work, and those kids are positive. I wish that I could test kids with many more mild symptoms so that I could get an idea of where we might be in that, because kids are the harbingers of disease, always have been. They can spread disease without us knowing it very quickly. And that's what we're starting to see. It's not that kids don't get it. They just don't get very sick from it. Thank God. I mean, we don't need our kids dying either. Doesn't mean they won't, some will, but the problem is they can spread it to vulnerable populations, and that's where we have a big problem.
Part of what's scary
Dr. Brown,
about the children and is the long-term effect. We have, because this is so new, we have no way of knowing if there's going to be long issues or what have you for them in 10 years or 20 years.
That is very scary. We're already seeing long-term effects in adults. Brain fog is a big one. Some people have not gotten their taste and smell back. Some people are suicidal because it has affected their brains, different centers in their brain. Some are having some memory loss or trouble concentrating. So we have some very significant side effects in the adult population. You know, we have this syndrome in children. We had a little kid in Port Arthur who actually did get COVID and had the hyper response syndrome as well. He was at Texas Children's for several weeks, where that can affect your heart, you know, and it affects your kidneys, and it affects your brain, and it affects your lungs. I mean, so yeah, this disease deserves much respect. It deserves much respect because the amount of havoc it can wreak is huge.
Dr. Renee, I had a question for you. Would you trust using the rapid antigen test, like the Abbott ID, on kids?
Yes, that was the one that we're trying to get, but we haven't gotten it yet. They promised it to us a couple of months ago, and we're still waiting.
I would love to follow up with you maybe after I actually have that test and can be of some support.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Bill, I think you had a question. Bill Dunlap.
oh, yes. Dr. Brown, could you speak, I guess, to the generational differences in attitude as far as, I guess, staying isolated? I know we have in the area children and grandchildren, and we would dearly love to see the grandchildren, not so much the children, but it's a situation that, you know, they're really pretty casual about social distancing, wearing masks, and you know, we've missed out on some family things, such as confirmations, and, showers, and baptisms, and that sort of thing. And it's caused friction between the children, that the grandparents are not participating in those things that are sometimes crowded events. And just I guess my question is, can grandparents be too hyper cautious in being around children and grandchildren?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. There's several different factors, psychological and otherwise, that are taking place here. Number one, this disease has become politicized, and so people are taking sides in that regard, and so their respect for the disease and their compliance with medical and scientific professionals is variable from person to person. Also, children and teenagers and young adults developmentally feel like they're bulletproof. So yeah, it's here, but it's not going to happen to me, or it's not going to affect me that poorly. Again, not understanding what it can do to someone else. So the more vulnerable populations, people over 60, 65, I think need to be cautious. You know, and I have some grandparents who say they'd rather get COVID and die than be separated from their families. And I get that too. So, you know, they're not getting visits at the nursing home and that type of thing, which is heartbreaking. So if you really did want to have more interaction with your grandchildren, I would try to have some type of family meeting about, you know, you don't have to hermit yourself like we are, but, you know, try to be a little more cautious. Make sure you're wearing your mask, make sure you're washing your hands. And then if you want to be around the kids, wear an N95, still try to keep your distance. If you're going to hug for a few seconds, facing away from one another, you know, like this, you know, for a second, wash your hands, that kind of thing, so that you have, I mean, we're social creatures, to have that physical touch contact with each other, you know, that helps us, you know, get through life. If you could have that kind of conversation with your family members and come up with some kind of conclusion, you know, that would be ideal. I have a 77-year-old mother who's living with me right now after an accident. I'm not trying to go everywhere and bring something home to her. If I brought something home to her, I'd never forgive myself. So everybody has to, I guess, decide what level of risk they're going to take.
I have a question from the chat from Robert Turner. He says, what is your vision in living with this disease this time next year, and how do you see the market?
I think it's going to take a good year before we're going to start to come to quote unquote normal. This is not going away anytime soon. I know you guys were talking about October possibly meeting in person. I think personally that it's going to be worse. Again, the infectivity rates are going down. However, flu's coming up. So those things like to go together. This is not going away anytime soon. Even if we get a vaccine that is ready January 1st, we got to get it out to the population, and then it's got to work. And that takes months. So I'm thinking next summer, we're probably going to start to see some really decline of this disease where we can go out and live life the way we did before.
And a second question, well, I'm getting lots now. Do you recommend that children get a flu vaccine this year?
Absolutely, as soon as possible. We were supposed to get our vaccine this week, but I think the hurricane has skewed that. But as soon as we get our vaccine, we're going to try to figure out how to get it distributed. Again, we can't cattle call people the way we used to. We pull in 20, 30 kids in the morning, 20, 30 kids in the afternoon, shot, out. We can't do that. So trying to figure out how to give large numbers of people the vaccine as quickly as possible is going to be problematic. And this is going to be a rehearsal for when COVID vaccine comes out, because we're going to have the same issue.
And then I'm not sure your knowledge on this one, but do you know how the Spanish flu from 1918 finally ended?
Millions of people died. They didn't have ventilators. They didn't have antivirals. They didn't have a lot of antibiotics when you can get a secondary infection. So there were a lot of things that they did not have. They did have more compliant people than we have now. They didn't quite understand at the very beginning the infectivity of this, but they quickly saw after, I think it was the Boston Marathon, one of the marathons, where they had a huge outbreak after that. There were people who fought the mask then. This is human nature. People don't like vaccines. They don't like masks. They don't like being told what to do. But there was a lot fewer people who fought masks back then than they have now. And it burned itself out in about 2 years.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. You gave us so much good information, and you explained it in such a normal way that people it makes it easy to understand. So I thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
We want to honor you with a donation made to our Rotary International Foundation in your honor and in your name. And two of our areas of focus really pertain to what you do, and that's disease prevention and treatment and maternal and child health. So we'll make it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Robin McCutcheon, Executive Director of the Samaritan Counseling Center, Mental Health Needs amid the COVID pandemic. I want to remind you that please get your donations for the disaster relief effort that we're making for Lake Charles into the office with Jackie as soon as you can. And if you want to donate money, you can give her a call, and she can help you do that in the way that you want to accomplish that. She sent a direct email earlier this morning for you to be able to sign up for committees, since we weren't able to do that in person. So if you'll please look at that email, see which committees you want to volunteer for, and we're going to start trying to get some of those things rolled out. Thank you all for attending the meeting today. We're going to end in our normal manner with the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build
goodwill and better
friendships?
And fourth, will it be beneficial?
beneficial for all concerned.
Have a good week. Thank you all for volunteering at the Salvation Army and the food bank and all the other places that need our help right now. Rotarians really do make a big difference. I'm so glad to know all of you. Have a great week, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.